level of influence that like teachers have, right?
100%.
Especially with these things of like, when you talk about history, when you talk about these kinds of myth making stuff, it's like, and especially with children, right? Especially with children, people who are trying to when the question is, what is my identity? I'm growing up in Quebec, and then you have a teacher who's like, guess what? You've been shortchanged. You're a Quebecer. Oh, you're like one of the best, and we have never gotten our just desserts.
Yeah.
That's gonna like just like on an emotional level,
Right.
that's gonna stay for a whole lifetime.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Colin Datsuba. I'm the host of Local 514. Today, we are discussing sovereignty, separatism, as the rest of Canada might call it. Who better to talk about sovereignty and the 30-year anniversary of the referendum than my friend here, Rose. How are you doing, Rose?
I'm good.
Rose,
Excited.
you know a little something about sovereignty?
A thing or two.
Rose is a community organizer here in Montreal, and I'll say an expert on whiteness in the sovereignty movement. This is to say she has done extensive research and interviews and just sort of studying I guess what's
The movement.
the movement, and we're going to talk a bit about her research as well as the legacy of the 1995 referendum and how its shadow still hangs over us today, and a little bit about the sovereignty movement today, because it's definitely not disappearing.
It's not done.
It's not done. It's not done. Third round. Third round's a charm. So yeah, I guess before we even talk about the 1995 referendum, right? Because right now where we're sitting today, this year is the 30th anniversary of it. What do you think led to that referendum?
Well, I think maybe in the 60s, maybe even before with the Quiet Revolution, there was like a class struggle for francophones in Quebec. And it's kind of like wanting to take back power, having like power in the political space, but also like for workers to be recognized as like a distinctive like people
Right,
in
right.
Quebec.
So
yeah.
you think the referendum has this kind of class dynamic to it, or at least the sovereignty movement had a
First,
class dynamic?
yeah,
Sure.
I think first that's how it started, and then it evolved into something else, like
Right.
maybe more like nationalist. But at first, I think it was definitely a class struggle.
You're saying workers wanted to take back power, right, in Quebec. Who had the power in that case?
The easy answer is like Anglophones. Maybe like we saw a lot of people who were like in power, like CEO. Maybe were more like the elites were more Anglos, and like the workers with like really small salaries were Francophones. So yeah, just having like better living condition, even like in the space when you see in Montreal, like who lived where in which housing situation.
Yeah, like the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Yeah, the architecture. That is something I noticed. I think is very obvious. Especially, I mean, so we're filming right now on the Concordia grounds, and Concordia is within like the Golden Square Mile of Montreal, right? And this was like in the late 1800s. This was a neighborhood where 50 families that lived in this neighborhood controlled something like more than 90% of all the wealth in Canada, right? And this was an English neighborhood, right? It's called Golden Square Mile, where if you go a little further out, Ushlag, other
Yeah,
kind of
the
places. Further out east, it's a very different kind of dynamic there, and the architecture is, of course, different. You don't have the same mansions and that kind of moneyed architecture.
Classe populaire,
Yeah. So I think I understand the kind of differences they're trying to talk about then. But the '95 referendum, it wasn't the first one.
No, it wasn't. Like the first one the PQ, there's like the Quiet Revolution, there's like Quebec gets like to enter modernity and like with like hydro, like they're developing, they're creating like a nation state.
These big projects.
Yeah, big projects with Bourassa, who's definitely not a sovereignist, but like wanting to, I think like, I just saw the documentary, Le Choc des Nations, about like the Bay James convention, and they were saying like his idea, like how he like did his political campaign, how to get like elected, was like there's 25% chômage, unemployment for Quebecers, so like let's start a project, which is like another big subject, very colonial.
This is Bourassa?
Ouais,
Okay.
like, you know, in the Bay James area, and like it's basically to give like francophones workers that are like unemployed, I mean,
Jobs.
to like have better condition. But then, you know, it evolves into something. What was the question again? Sorry.
The question was the 1980 referendum.
Right.
Yeah.
I think like PQ came to power, and then there was like more that idea of like protecting the culture, protecting the language, La Loi 101, etc. And then in the 80s, it's a project, but it's not clear, and that's why it failed, I think. It's like 60% voted no, I think. And people were like, this is not really clear. Even the question, I think, on the ballot was not clear.
Tried to say yes to something so unclear.
Yeah. And there's other reason, obviously, that people said no. But after that, like 15 years later, PQ is still in power, and they decided to maybe be more clear about the question. But
Yeah. So then 15 years after 80, we're in the 90s now, firmly in the 90s. Parizeau becomes the premier, and he is promising a referendum in the first mandate.
Yeah, there's also, like, I forgot to say, there's like in between the 80s and the 95, there's like Lac Meech, which like...
What's the Meech Lake Accord for?
It's recognizing like Quebec as a distinctive society and maybe like giving more legal power. But the rest of Canada felt like there was a lack of consultation on that subject, on the Lac Meech Accord. And there was a big Indigenous resistance in Manitoba because, you know, like recognizing the nation of Quebec is also not in conflict, but like for Indigenous nations, it's like, well...
We're here too.
We want to be recognized too, so I think it wasn't like it was sorry, flop. It didn't work. And then after that, like Charlottetown, same kind of thing, didn't go through. And so I think it was like, especially Meech was kind of like humiliating for...
Humiliating.
Yeah, for like people behind that project and for Quebecers. So I think there was still like something brewing for this referendum.
Right. So since 80s, all these kinds of attempts to kind of patriate Quebec into the Constitution,
Yeah.
the failure of that happening, this Indigenous resistance to it, it's kind of everything I've read so far kind of suggests that this was just kind of like it just kept turning up the heat, right?
Ouais.
That leads up to 1995.
100%, yeah.
So now we're in the 90s. It's the 90s again.
I'm 3 years old.
Yeah. It's 95. You're 3 years old. I am not even a year old. But I'm sure I was thinking about this question of should Quebec become sovereign. So the 1995 referendum, in contrast to the 1981, very close.
Yeah.
Famously close. I think I'm sure our viewers have seen the statistics, the actual end result. But for those who are not familiar, this was really like it was less than 1% vote of a difference where the no side won. I mean, clearly we're still in Canada. The no side won with exactly, where was it? Would I put this down now? Would I not write it down?
Yeah, I think you have it there, no?
Oh, there we go. No wins. I need to improve my handwriting. The no side wins with 50.58% of the vote. The yes side with 49 point some change. But this was like I remember like watching. I watched. There's a lot of great documentaries about this, like very historic. I mean, I think this is like a pivotal moment in Quebec history, and there's a lot of great documentaries that kind of capture the lead up to it. The conversations are happening in the street, in the public, in dépanneurs, in cafes, you know. And they had great footage of the actual like
Night.
the night at both camps, and it was like a roller coaster.
Oh
right?
yeah, because like for all night the yes was winning.
Yeah.
And they were like,
Party.
let's
There,
fucking
yeah,
go.
we
But
did it.
like last minute it switched and they were devastated.
Yeah, I think it's one of the Montreal votes because we'll have like
Oh, yeah.
we'll have a map of the actual like voting results. But like once the Montreal, I think was like the biggest region of no voters. Usually it's kind of like
What?
most of it the West Island. You have some sort of like Western Montreal neighborhoods. Saint Michel's in there as well. Once those votes start coming in, the Gatineau area, you start to see like the no side shoot up, and then right at like a little after 10 p.m., the vote was called for no.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, we're skipping a few months of I guess the campaign that led to that moment. One of the things I thought was really interesting was that as this discussion around the referendum started, the support for it was around 36%. And it's really throughout the whole campaign that you see the numbers go up. And I mean, could you I guess introduce us to some of the lead figures of the 95 referendum?
You have Jacques Parizeau, that's the premier in Quebec, that's on the yes side, and Lucien Bouchard, which is like the leader of the Bloc Québécois, which just had like an election in the federal election, was like the official opposition
Oh, yeah.
in Ottawa,
Little
which is kind of like crazy.
Funny piece of Canadian political history. The Bloc
Yeah.
Québécois at one point was official opposition.
I think they had like 52 seats, which is big. So it's definitely a different context. And yeah, I think there was like, they choose Lucien Bouchard as like the leader, chief negotiator. He's like, he's got like charisma, prestige, like he's like a lawyer, he knows how to talk. So people got behind that. And I think they definitely were able to create like a rally up people behind their project.
Yeah. I mean, people really. I mean, the discussion around it goes that it's because of Lucien Bouchard's kind of like charisma, like you're saying, is sort of what was able to kind of convince people because he's kind of a convincer. You know, he's kind of a good, eloquent speaker compared to Parizeau, who's maybe a little more kind of like gung-ho.
And they had like different vision. I think Parizeau was like sovereignty right now, no matter what. And I think Lucien was more in the idea of like, let's negotiate and maybe not lose, like create a partnership with Canada. A bit like, you know, what René Lévesque was proposing, like
Back in
Souveraineté
1980,
Association, but like, you know, not scare people in the terms of like economics. But yeah, I saw like documentaries and like he was like, there was like sold out stadium for like every day to like listen to him. So I think they did a great campaign.
Yeah. I mean, to run a campaign where you take the support from 36% to near 50% is like incredible in such a short time span. Because that's the one thing about like, it's something I think is interesting is like, I think looking back, we sort of like, when you look back at history, it's easy to flatten it because you lose kind of like the details and the certain kind of like, even like conflicts between allies, just because that's how history is remembered. But like when you look into the we camp, it's interesting hearing about the different approaches that people wanted to take to sovereignty, right? I mean, even compared to the 1980 referendum where I think in 95, it was like, Bouchard was like, we're not ready for it. Like in the lead up to like Parizeau announces that we're not ready for it. We need to build more like soft support before we go into it. And Parizeau was like, no, right now. Like we can't wait. I think I remember like Parizeau like criticizing people who thought we should wait. He's like, you guys have the attitudes of losers. This kind of gives you an idea of what maybe life was like behind the scenes. There's a good book by Chantal Albert and this other journalist who looked into the referendum, and they found like, I mean, something the two writers found was that it was just chaos.
I mean, I'm
scenes for
sure
both
there's
camps.
like, I would want to know more about it because last week there was like Ruba and Solzhenitsyn that were on
The co-spokespeople for Quebec Solidaire.
Tout le monde en parle, and they were talking about the week camp, and they're saying like in the 90s, like en 1995, il y avait Éric Duhaime that was in the Yes camp, which is like now the leader of the Conservative Party in Quebec. Il y avait Françoise David, which was like the leader of Quebec once.
Quebec Solidaire,
Ouais, Québec solidaire. So like there's always been like division in that movement, but it's true that we don't really got that nuance when we're and it's gonna be we're gonna talk about it, but right now it's the same.
Yeah. Let's before we talk about right now, let's. I think I think there's a lot of moments in the 1995 referendum that I think are really pivotal, and I think have really formed and informed the debate since about like, well, just the conversation around like sovereignty, and you see how it's sort of transformed since. But let's go to some of these stats about the actual. So this was a referendum with 93.5% of voters who turned out. There's a 93.5% of around 5 million eligible voters in Quebec turned out because they're like, this is a big question.
Yeah.
We got to come out. We
Crazy.
gotta let them know what we're thinking. For the final vote, 60% of francophones voted yes or oui. 40% of francophones voted no. 95% of non-francophones, so anglophones or allophones, voted no.
Yeah. Pretty clear.
Pretty clearly. I mean, when you look at Montreal, when you see the kind of like
Ouais.
division of vote among urban centers, I think there's a clear story there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about how the POQ, the Quebec Liberals, sort of tried to like really rein in or like bring in more support on that kind of level from that kind of crowd.
I think like there's some stuff that got out later, but the scandal towards the no camp, like funding federal like organization to like millions of dollars to campaign for the no was pretty problematic. But yeah, the like buses show up and they're like, "We love you," and I mean, it's go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's some great footage of just like young Anglophones coming in from like across Canada, and they're like, "Quebec, we love you," and then like old like Quebec people are like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" Like,
Who are you?
They're like, "Who are you? Why are you only coming
Never
now?"
saw
You
you
know?
before.
It's kind of like that. I do think it was pretty. I kind of empathize with those like the Quebecois I saw. This is in Breaking Points on CBC. Oh no! This the one I'm thinking of. It was in an NFB documentary. That's just kind of like there's no like voiceover. It's just kind of like filming different interactions. But you have this guy writing from like I think he's from like Alberta. He's just writing like I love you Quebec, nah, nah.
Yeah.
And this like Quebecers like, why do you do this? Like why do you come here and do this?
Tell
You know,
me.
what's the point? You know? And he's like really charged about it. He's kind of like roasting it, and he's like, oh, it's because I love you. He's like you're only doing this because it's like. Like there's like a risk of leaving, and I think even like the Quebecois guy in the documentary was like, I was a no supporter before this. You just turned me into a yes supporter.
Yeah,
which I thought was like
oh
hilarious.
yeah, that's funny. Also, like the no that we need to address is Indigenous nations.
Oh yes, absolutely.
In Quebec, the Crees they did their own referendum, and I think it was 96.9.
I got that. So the Cree did their own referendum on whether or not the Cree Nation should stay a partner with Canada or with Quebec, and it was a 96.9% to stay with Canada. So that's an even bigger percentage of Cree who wanted to stay with Canada compared to non-francophones.
You have to understand that like it's post Oka crisis, 90s. After that, like Grande Baleine, the government of Quebec just they wanted to do another hydro project in Angava, and there was a consultation to Indigenous people. So like the Crees and the Inuit really did a great campaign internationally to oppose that project, and they're just like, why would I sign a... Do you say that in English? Like a white check, like un chèque en blanc.
Yeah.
It's like, why would I say yes to something there's like no rights? Like just before the referendum, Jacques Parizeau proposed a law in Quebec recognizing Indigenous rights, but he was like saying, au niveau territorial, c'est l'intégralité du territoire. Like there's no land back in this project. So I think Indigenous people have always been like, we've been dealing with one colonial states for like hundreds of years, and we've created like we had some treaties, some like
that I recognize,
some compensation. It's definitely not like perfect, but like there's something there, and you guys are asking me to switch colonial project. without like
You don't
any.
you don't get the protections that even like the minimal protections
What?
that do exist.
Yeah, like, are you gonna pay? Are you gonna do like? There's nothing, no plan. I understand why they didn't trust.
No, no, of course. I mean, I think when we talk about the sort of Indigenous refusal of the referendum and the kind of question of Quebec sovereignty, I think we begin to talk about the kind of these elements of like whiteness in the movement, in this in the idea in the project of sovereignty rather, because you have because like we were saying, sovereignty is like sort of like any political project is multifaceted. You have any different number of camps within a movement who are trying to take more control, take more power, influence more, right? So you have some sovereigntists who are, I think today, who are kind of like
Decolonial.
sympathetic, decolonial, sympathetic to the question of indigenous kind of issues. But then, of course, you have people who are not.
Yeah.
To talk about these issues of whiteness in the sovereignty movement, and that I think I can point to 95 and be like, oh yeah, that was a certified white moment. So one of them, certified white moment, is the lack of support for sovereignty among indigenous, the Cree being this example here. I think another one, of course, is Parizeau's famous explanation in the
Infamous.
infamous explanation of why they lost,
What?
where he was like, "Well, it's money
Say
and
it.
the ethnic vote." Say it. And this was like, I think this is like a dividing line. I mean, this was even within like the core team of the PQ and the sort of the sovereignty camp, the we camp.
Yeah.
It was sort of a dividing line because I know Jean-François Lisée, who was the speechwriter, who wrote the question.
Who wrote the speech for Parizeau that night, which he didn't read.
He didn't write that part. Even Jean-François Lisée, the former at this point in time, the former PQ leader, even expressed disappointment that Parizeau kind of drew that distinction, created that separating line because Lisée thought of it more as a civic nationalism, and Parizeau was like, no, this is not a civic nationalism, this is an ethnic nationalism. And during the campaign as well, I think that's one certified white moment. Another one during the campaign, I think, is Lucien Bouchard, the chief negotiator, who just trying to like talk about why we should support sovereignty, and he made this statement about like, this is a great injustice that we're one of the white races with fewest children, and it's like and that one is like there's a lot to unpack there, but like I think when we were talking about that quote before the show, we start getting into like stuff like replacement theory, right?
Oh yeah.
Which I think there's like. So for the people who don't know, replacement theory is sort of this reactionary, pretty, I'd say, racist, supremacist kind of understanding of like whatever population, usually a white one, or actually you can apply it to other places, but like whatever population slowly being like
erased,
whittled away, erased, replaced by some unwanted population. You know? And there's a lot of different ways you can talk about that. There's a lot of different like settings you can apply that, but that's just the general idea. And for him to kind of use at this point, it kind of shows that like, of course, not all sovereigntists believe this, but there's still room within the project for this kind of line of thinking.
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit at the roots of it, without like being a straightforward question. Like we don't really talk about it, but it's like, but just like my research with young sovereignists is, why are you sovereignist? Is kind of based on an imaginaire national that we created in Quebec. And
like the myths of the Quebec nation.
The mythologie qui permet genre d'avoir cette idée qu'on est distinct et qu'on a besoin to have a nation is based on, I don't want to say lie, but like it's mythology, like saying
it highlights a specific idea.
It's basically saying like we weren't like the colonial violence. We were like allies with indigenous people when like the French people got here. We were like,
it was all hand holding.
We're like similar.
Where did they go?
We have similar values. We're like basically the same, and that's like the auto-autochtonisation,
when people self-identify. Or when people.
It's so big. It's big in Quebec. It's interesting to look at that question. Why white Québécois, like les Canadiens, Français, catholiques, like believe they have like ancestry that are indigenous and they're like the same.
Well, it's like how Métis means something, I think, like a little like culturally different.
It's a nation
Yeah.
in Manitoba, but here it's like je suis métis, les métis de l'Est, but it's pretendians, and they're just like, it's such a crazy question. It's putting in danger the identity of indigenous people by raising it, saying everyone's indigenous now. But also it's like, oh, we're different from the federal. We're different from Canada because we didn't do those like violence, which is false.
Right.
We like, there's like a nation, les Renards, that probably not many people knows about, but we, genre, on a instinct cette population, like it's...
That population is gone.
Yeah, it's gone. It's because of us. Like,
Right.
it's not because of the Anglos. Like, they weren't there yet here. So there's many ideas. Also, like, I found interesting that interviewing the young sovereignists, they were saying, I got sovereignist when I had the class of history of Quebec, which, funny enough, my mom gave all her career.
And she missed one.
I had that class. But she was addressing indigenous struggle, so I think I got like a different perspective.
Okay,
but I'm sure there's other teacher that like throw that in the...
It shows you just the level of influence that like teachers have, right?
100%.
Especially with these things of like, you know, when you talk about history, when you talk about these kinds of myth making stuff, it's like, and especially with children, right? Especially with children, people who are trying to, when the question is, what is my identity? I'm growing up in Quebec. And then you have a teacher who's like, guess what? You're like, you've been shortchanged, you know? You're a Quebecer? Oh, you're like one of the best. And we have never gotten our just desserts.
Yeah.
You know, that's gonna like, just like on an emotional level,
Right.
that's gonna stay for a whole lifetime.
Yeah, because, oh, that's another question, but I felt like it's something that they all answered. I started to be sovereignist in that class, which I understand. Like, if
How
you
many
look at
people did you interview again?
around like 15 for my master, but just like looking at
Your master's thesis.
the new like interviews like avec le maire de Laval and stuff, people are saying like, yeah, I saw Les Patriotes, the movie, and I was like, oh shit, that's fucked up, which I understand. We definitely live traumas and oppression from the Anglos as a society, but it's just like, how does it resonate today? I'm not sure. Like, I feel like that question is a bit not the same, definitely not the same today. So it's, yeah, I don't know. Like, I was asking them, why are you sovereignist today? And it's kind of like, they were also all from the ecological movement.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the white people that I interviewed. So I was like, okay, it's like, there's like, what's your struggle? What do you fight for? And why not, like, is it not intersectionnel, genre?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One of them told me like, I'm rooting for sovereignty and I'm giving energy there because Black Lives Matter and like Palestine movement is éphémère. It's like something that's gonna...
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, can you tell me more about this?
I mean, that's interesting because it's like,
I'm like,
from this person's perspective, they're like,
ouais.
they're like, that's far away.
He said that it was something that's gonna disappear. Like, it's in his perspective, it was trendy right now, and it's because of his positionality. But
course,
like, and he was saying that the sovereignist movement is something that's like bigger, and it's gonna like, ça rassemble toutes ces luttes-là. But if you look, like, they say that, but actually in the action, does it? Not really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's really interesting. I would love to just eat some popcorn, watch some of these interviews, because I feel like you really get to see, especially with these kinds of big questions of like, oh, why do you support this like movement? Why have you given time to it? You're gonna see a lot of stuff. I think it's really interesting that there's this kind of ecological angle, right?
Yeah.
Because that's probably something that I think wasn't as strong back in '95. This seems to be a new one where people see these struggles, which in other places, like let's say in the rest of Canada, in the US, in Europe, don't really have that kind of sovereignty kind of association. But in this case, they see it, I guess, they see sovereignty as a tool towards that, right? Yeah, which I guess it's interesting seeing sovereignty as a tool towards the ecological stuff when there's still plenty of sovereigntists who I think are not necessarily
But that's where
ecologists.
the myths are powerful,
Right.
because I also like analyze all their Instagram posts as the MGS, and they're presenting the federal state as the petro state, which yes.
Yeah,
But if I look at our government in Quebec, like hydro is our like it's how we define our nation,
of course.
and it's like as problematic as the petro like
Yeah.
development. It
Yeah.
destroyed indigenous land. It displaced indigenous people. Like la faune et la flore are like destroyed.
It's kind of
So
like greenwashed a bit when people
it's
talk about
greenwash for
because
sure,
people are
because
like,
it's
oh,
like
it's
oh
renewable.
water.
Yeah.
It's water. It's
Yeah.
renewable. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's the same with like electric cars. Like they're extracting lithium. It's still extractivist. It's just the mythology, which like all the fault of like the worst stuff is on the federal. I just don't see it. Like for me, a Quebec government is also harmful
Right.
for that type of question.
Yeah,
You know?
and to give them even more like just unchecked power is kind of something that could be dangerous. I guess is the conclusion
100%.
there.
Like if the plan was like super clear and really, c'est une libération, and there's like land back for indigenous, and it's just not that right now. And it depends to who you're looking at. Like you can look at the PQ, you can look at QS, you can look at young people that are not like with the We Quebec, that are not necessarily like attaching themselves to a political party, but yeah, there's many questions
Yeah.
to be answered.
I mean, so right now we're talking about, I guess how sovereignty has sort of transformed these days. And when I look at the current government, provincial government, the CAC, I do see some echoes of sovereignty there. Because I think this is like, so the CAC is the Coalition Avenir au Québec, led by François Legault, came into power in 2018, massive majority, right? And they were able to steal seats from the Liberals, from the PQ, you know. I think the rise of the CAC, I find, is very indicative of where the sovereignty sort of momentum has gone, right?
Yeah.
So since 95, no one. And I guess there's this sort of, the way I see the CAC's rise is sort of like a changing of the goalposts, right? Where it's like, okay, we weren't able to get full independence, but maybe we can still go for like nationalism, right? Within the kind of Canadian like framework. And you see the CAC doing that, right? Where it's like, because they've been able to steal so many like sovereigntist votes, because people are like, all right, I didn't get sovereignty, but let's go for just like more like nationalism, you know. Let's go for this kind of even more ethnic nationalism, where it's like the CAC is like, we don't need to have our own country to marginalize immigrants, to put the blame on immigrants. We don't need our own country, but we can still
Do it.
we can still do it, you know. And that's and it's been kind of successful, right? They won their second mandate pretty handedly. They're pushing things through, and I think it's interesting because they say specifically, we're never going to have a referendum. We're a federalist party, but they still kind of like
But
scratch that itch.
he's from PQ, right?
Yeah.
And before like there was l'ADQ that was in the rise too, and it transformed. And I think yes, it's after you said the famous quote from Parizeau.
Money, ethnic votes.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh, la laïcité.
Yep.
That becomes a topic, and that's how we were gonna, on va être distinct. We're like taking a bit like the French debates, and we put it here, and we're like, that's how we're
Yeah,
different.
the separation of church and state. That's modern, right?
Yeah,
That's like modern. Yeah.
and that's how Quebec is different from Canada, which is like, I don't want to be part of that project.
No, yeah. Well, I mean, we've interviewed people on the show like Stephen Brown over at National Council of Canadian Muslims, but even like a lot of people see the laïcité stuff, the separation of church and state stuff, as just veiled kind of like Islamophobia specifically.
100%.
And then there's also some other people who are like implicated, but like clearly like it's just that's the energy they want, you know. That's where they want to put all their resources into. And even like you have the CAC, like, you know, even though they don't support a referendum, they kind of want to like emotionally capitalize on it. Where like just last year, Legault was talking about like threatening to hold a referendum on immigration, you know, because like that's one of the big things where like, because when I think about sovereignty and Quebec having its own kind of state, country, the idea of that is to kind of take more power, have more decision-making power, and have more resources available to you, right? Because they're saying the argument is that Canada chooses too much for us. We should kind of decide for ourselves. I think when you look at the CAC's sort of decisions, you can see they're still trying to get more power, and you can kind of see what some, I guess, nationalists would try to use that power for, right? And it's for things like just pure like the oppression of like minorities, you know. I mean, Legault famous. I always talk about it on this show. I think the best Legault quote was when he said, "There's no systemic racism in Quebec."
Wow.
You know, that's. I mean, when we talk about the legacy
Words.
of sovereignty of nationalism in Quebec, and I find the issue of whiteness is like all over it.
Yeah, I mean, like just the French, like the language question is always in a position with other languages. Like we saw it, and that's where like maybe I'm going somewhere else right now, but like when you look, let's say at QS, which has the pretension of being decolonial and sovereignist, and you look at how they're gonna present it, and you feel like, oh, that's maybe I would agree with that from my perspective. If we're like with indigenous, working with indigenous and making sure that it's their project, not like ours, and we impose it.
Right. Yeah.
That could be something I could like be convinced on, like the land back and being a progressive state.
Yeah.
But like in actual like action, you remember the law 96 about French language. It's like loi 101 2.0. And they went for it. They voted yes, alors que they had like many indigenous people that were presenting themselves for the election. It was right before the last election, I think 2021, 2022.
Yeah.
And a bunch of indigenous people that were presenting themselves had to se distancer and be like, oh, I don't support this because it was really harmful for indigenous language. And also like some indigenous people that have like the second language as English, c'est discriminatoire.
Yeah.
So there's always, I feel like one of my conclusion when I look at this project, it's always in contradiction, or c'est paradoxal with like indigenous sovereignties. It's
the project of Quebec sovereignty.
Yeah, it's like it's gonna, because we need to legitimate ourselves as a nation, we're gonna do it over other nations.
Right. Yeah. Once the actual moment comes, push comes to shove, it's like, it's chances are it's gonna
because
be,
if you
at their
recognize in
expense.
other nations, it's at the expense of Quebec nation, and we're too fragile for that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, as it stands today, you see a lot of headlines, articles about sovereignty sort of back. There's a lot of great pieces coming out, like the one in Urbania we kind of talked about. There's the appearance on the Tout le monde en parle with the new young sovereigntists. I guess what do you make of this current rise of sovereignty among young people? Because it's, when you look at there's a survey put out in La Presse where the support for sovereignty among people who are older, above 50, has decreased since last year, but the support for sovereignty among young people has gone up a lot. I think right now the total vote would be something like 65% would vote no in general, and 35% would vote yes.
I think when I look at the young generation, new generation, I'm trying to understand what's their political, like, qu'ils veulent obtenir. It's
what's like their project, or what's
it's protection of the culture and the language. Which I totally understand if you put yourself in the perspective that we're in North America. There's like, we're a bit solo as francophones. There's other little pockets of francophonie, but I'm like, where's the political project? Like, I understand this, but
you understand social cultural project, but where's the actual, like?
I mean, do we need a nation state for that? I don't know. I would want to hear more about like the social part of it, le progressisme. But I'm not hearing really that. It's really like the culture. We saw like a couple of musicians on TikTok I guess it's trendy, which I understand. I have a take that's maybe controversial. But I feel like as white francophones in this context where we talk a lot about identity politics, and there's like, we talked about Black Lives Matter, Palestine, the indigenous struggle. I'm like, I feel like they're at lost. And what's my struggle? What's my identity? And how can I put myself in action for wanting more, wanting something, like a meaning to my life? And I just think it's hard for them to be like, oh, maybe I'm not the priority in terms of like struggle, and I should put my efforts in like other liberation projects. But it's hard for white people to do that. So the sovereignty project is like, yeah, that's my struggle.
Yeah, because it's like I'm in the middle of that. I'm at the center of that. Me who has suffered gets to be the one who gets power. But then there's, I guess, little. I mean, it sounds like there's just little. There's a very little sense of solidarity in that kind of project, I guess.
That's what I feel. I mean, in genre en parole, like they're saying, yeah, it's like they're absorbed like the indigenous critique, like capitalism do with feminism, or you know,
Of course,
like,
yeah.
and they're just like, well, we've heard you, and we're definitely gonna do. It's gonna be nation to nation, but en action, like when you see how they protest or for what they protest, what they take action for.
Doesn't build confidence. No,
c'est ça.
No, yeah. I guess it's like the thing you're talking about before. You know, it's like the thing that builds most confidence. It's not just an empty statement. It's actual like right now in the moment. Are you working with them right now in the moment?
Yeah.
Are you trying to create space within your organization for
C'est
these?
ça. But also, I don't want to be like, I don't want to erase the old part of people that are for sovereignty that aren't white. And like, I do understand that what I saw, that they're looking for something like hope or a political project that's going to be answer all the crises that we're going through right now. I get that, the wanting something, because the political class is not giving us that right now. There's no hope for the future. It's just like, yeah, we're talking about immigration and like laïcité. But yeah, I'm curious to see if it can like go further and how the clashes are gonna be at play, because you already see like with the rise of PQ, PSPP is kind of like anti-immigration and is like everything that they're saying, and then you have like QS that's kind of like, we're in the we, but we don't want to do this like being exclusive and the exclusive like exclure des gens.
Yeah, excluding people. Yeah.
I don't know, like the no is more.
You think it's a clearer, or at least it's just kind of what status quo.
C'est quand même fondamental, like the difference between. I don't know if they can rally up people, but I also have another take. In the end, like if like people from QS, like genre, let's say Sol, he's got like the ballot question and yes or no, but there's still like problematic stuff proposed in that project, like excluding indigenous from the conversation or whatever. It's gonna be hard to say no. I think they've been wanting this like all their life, so it's gonna be easier to say yes.
Yeah. They'll no matter, even if it's kind of problematic, goes against some progressive values, these values of decolonialism and anti-racism that the party really, like, I find tries to set itself up on. Sometimes, yeah. Like I said, everything it's always a struggle, right? I guess the question you're asking is like, you know, if it comes down to the moment and you have this project that is incredibly that might be far from these kinds of values, would they still vote yes? That's kind of the question.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah, to be
seen. We'll see. I mean, the PQ is currently leading in the polls. We have a provincial election next year. A lot can happen. I think a year is an eternity in political time. You know, a lot can change in a week, and we have a whole year ahead. Any words to people who might be curious about sovereignty, people who might want to push for change, decolonialism, a better vision of sovereignty? Any advice?
I mean, there's so many sovereignty movements from indigenous nations in Quebec that we can support, like all the fight that they just did. Je pense que c'était la loi 97 sur la foresterie. That was like a massive push, like they pushed back on that project, and ça s'est pas donné finalement. I think that's where I would put my energy, but it's just me.
Incredible. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, talking about the 30 years since money and the ethnic vote stole the 1995 referendum. I'm just kidding.
My mother's gonna kill me. Disown.
That's all for today's episode, folks. Thank you, Rose, for joining and participating in this discussion.
Always a pleasure.
Until next time, folks.
Bye.